First and foremost, welcome everybody. Events like this are really beneficial. They're beneficial for me, they're beneficial for you. And again, a huge congratulations to the organisers for such a good venue. And again, such good people here. First word of caution, I am not legally trained. This is my own opinions. Again, if this advice helps you, great. If it damages you, again, there's no warranty on that, okay? I got dared to do this last night in the bar because again, it's just that piece of just trying to figure out where are people with DORA. Are you guys under this regulation? Are you interested in knowing about this regulation? Or where are people? Just so in terms of just the people in the room, does DORA apply to you? Okay, so good mix there. So that's just my small bit of Gaeilge. It's a pun on Des Bishop's Cod the Feckin Mocan Elach. And just, we do have the English version, what is DORA? And again, I am fundamentally a lazy person. No better people to tell you about what DORA is than European institutions themselves. Again, it's an act. It's coming into play on the 17th of January 2025. It's a regulatory act. It is the law. And basically, it's coming into play to protect us as EU citizens, to ensure that any investments we make, any money we put in banks is available to us and things like that. And you've all seen the high profile from various institutions over the last number of years where either a lack of investment or a lack of testing or a lack of sense where events have happened. And it's quite funny. If you can prevent an event, you can stop it in the first 10, 15 seconds. If you can stop it in the first 15 minutes or hour, the amount of work you prevent, the amount of stuff that trickles on and fires on. I'm always astounded at that. Like, we're all human, people miss events, but if you miss an event, how much work is created? Second piece of this, what's the purpose of it? I kind of covered it already there in terms of just, we are so dependent on technology now. Nothing works without technology. My easiest analogy of this is, I was in Romania 2 years ago, and I was in a bike race, and I was washing the bike, my last job before driving home from Romania, and I left my phone on top of the coin machine in the car wash. How naked I felt. I had no GPS, I had no music, I had no audiobooks, I had nothing for that very long journey home. So just, like, if you think about it, like, we don't even realize how dependent we now are on technology. So what does DORA cover? So it's a series of pillars. So again, ICT risk management, which is a very strange term, but it's really what most CISOs do. We're specialized risk managers. Managing your third parties. So we've had all this, migration to the cloud. We had that thing this morning in terms of boards, excos. We need to do AI. We need to do cloud. We need to outsource. How to manage that risk. And because we've done it, and because we're all doing it, and we may be doing it with the same people, there is that piece now where the regulators are trying to find out who are your third parties, and if we add them all together in one big spreadsheet and we do the numbers on it, certain ICT suppliers are going to turn up. Microsoft, Amazon, and maybe others. Digital operational resilience testing. I love testing. I love the bit, it's like training to be match fit. So again, just coming from that it's mandated that you now do this. And it's mandated rather differently from how traditionally we've done this. ICT-related incidents, there are now mandatory reporting requirements. This is the biggest change. A major incident is any system intrusion or network access, irrespective of whether they access data. So now we're like the GDPR people. We're going to report a lot more initially on this one. There's going to be events that in the past, no harm done, no material effect, all is good. Let's go back to doing the day job now and wait for the next incident. But that really is a changer when you see, attacker in the middle type attacks, bypassing modern MFA, things like that are going to become a bigger problem for us. Information sharing. This is the only voluntary piece in this, and it's a problem that a lot of industries have. Banks in particular are really good at this. And information sharing is really useful. It's what we're doing here today. But it's also, if you think about it, you know, our job is to put the defensive controls in place to protect revenue streams in our businesses. But that data is really valuable. If that's correlated, if it's given to law enforcement or organizations that can help take down organizations, especially the larger networks or the larger, you know, malware as a service, phishing as a service, those type of things. And we've also seen that great success in terms of the takeovers that law enforcement are now doing of secure networks. You know, we've seen that historic one in terms of only 400 users of a secure channel, but if law enforcement own the network, God, the information to get is brilliant. And then that last one, oversight of critical third parties. And that's something for the regulator. So when we all fill out our registers of third parties, it's all going to come back down to the regulator going through that. And he'll decide if some of your suppliers are critical and systemic to the financial services industry. They will appoint a regulator to them and they will charge them fees. And the Act will apply to them as well. So that's a nice change. It removes some of the responsibility from organizations. And your suppliers will have to have, you know, how they are compliant. And these are organizations that probably never had a compliance function. Like, why would you have a compliance function, you know, when you're a CSP? So it's going to change that game a little. Probably make services more expensive to us as well, but that's how it goes. So if anyone's interested, there's some nice pillars. Everyone goes on about the 5 pillars of DORA. And I've just realized it's down here as well, so I don't have to keep looking back. Again, the way the Act is written, the way the pillars are split out, is really good. All the pillars, at least 3 to 4 of the pillars, come with an RTS, regulatory technical standard, which is very prescriptive. It says how it's to be enforced. And there's lots of musts in there. So that first pillar. So the one change here is, you know, this is a regulatory driven, top-down management. Your board is ultimately accountable for compliance with DORA. Responsibility firmly lies there. They appoint people like me. They enable me through funds. They expect through my expertise and otherwise. They've slightly third-partied it out, but they can't third-party out the risk. If they chose the wrong person in me, it's on them. The last piece is that it's a risk management system. So everything now is switching for me. Everything is about risk assessment. So when you do your testing, it's about what risks have you identified out of that testing, feeding those back in. The description of this sounds very like ISO 27001. ISO 27001, top-down, management-driven, risk-based. But if you ever look at ISO 27001, it's not very prescriptive. It tells you all the processes you should have. Every time you identify a risk, it's going to be one of the ISO 27002 controls. But it's a voluntary program. And we also have wonderful things like maturity models. And most people would say to you, and for those that wouldn't take a maturity model, one is either, I don't even know about this, or, oh yeah, we have a policy. It's up there on the shelf gathering dust. You know, level 2 is we have a policy and a procedure. Level 3, we have a policy, a procedure, and we follow it. Some of the time, most of the time, whatever. That level 4 maturities, policy, procedure, we follow it. We can evidence it. And that level 5 is that feedback loop. Policy, procedure, we can evidence it. And we've this feedback loop that's continuous improvement. The change that will happen with DORA is your maturity level for certain things will move to 4 and 5. That's a real sea change. Very prescriptive. The one change for me is about a year ago, I had an audit finding. I was a single point of failure in the business. And it got upgraded by the audit committee. Not only was it a single point of failure, but because I was answering through a CIO and CTO, I had no independence of reporting. So now I work for the business. And I'm a specialized risk manager in the business. Do I work for risk and compliance? Do I work for the business? Where do I now sit? Do I work for legal? there's a new challenge there in that. I asked somebody for advice on this. I'm very good at going back to people that work in the same industry as me. And the first reaction of the person I asked was, "Oh, you lucky thing. You're out from underneath that." But then the second reaction was, "Which one has the most money?" So I thought the business had. So now I answered the COO. Once you make that move and shift, there's now needed for effectively what we would call an IT security manager embedded in technology. That's a technological function. That's running controls. Sometimes you see job adverts out there when you look at the market, and they're looking for a CISO and an IT security manager all rolled up in a bow. That's marking your own homework. So again, just beware of that approach. If you own it from a technology or a technology owner perspective, that's where the responsibility should lie to secure it. My accountability is I have to make sure it is secured. And that's where the risk management process comes in. Funniest reaction I've got from the technical people. We should have been doing all this anyway. So there's nothing in DORA that's new, that's, unreasonable. It just mandates a lot of musts and that you have to do it properly. So if you have ISO 27001, you already have the practices, the processes, policies, procedures, evidence-based controls. We have a tooling that we use to manage our ISO program. We bought a framework for DORA that came in on top of it. It changed the way our framework works in terms of we now have 57 new controls. And some of the controls are appoint, a media spokesperson. That's not there under ISO. ISO around BCP and DR. 2013 version of ISO was you had to make sure your security tooling survived in the event of a BCP and DR. 2022 slightly better on that in terms of your ICT has to survive. Now is that your ICT has to survive, but it doesn't really care about your business functions. Now under DORA, it's more about that, if that makes sense. The push is back to understanding your business and making sure it survives. The last piece there, we talked about that maturity level increase, but the mindset and behavioral change. Because we've been doing things in a certain way for a long time, if there is no great oversight, if there's no one holding people to task, if auditors arrive in, your ISO auditor arrives and you go through all your interviews and meetings and you best foot forward and you bring what it's like on an ideal day and he accepts that as evidence. We've trained people that way, that we can cod auditors or we can filibuster them and all that type of stuff. So now there's a cultural change to tell people that now we're in a legal environment rather than a voluntary environment. And that's kind of hard on people because, we do what we always do. We're creatures of habit. Incident reporting. And this is the most fun for me. That first thing that they said, mentioned it earlier, any unauthorized access to your system is now reportable. In certain institutions, reporting to the regulator. Now we're going to report more often. And it's not serious things that we're reporting. It's just so that they can correlate what they have. It's not a fear-based thing, if that makes sense. The timings as well. 24 hours to classify, 3 days to file your full incident report, and then 20 days to follow up with the impact of it and what you're going to do about it. So now we're into very strict timelines. Your SIEM and ICT teams have to be aware. It's very important to raise the flag early. Your incident response manager, absolutely critical that he understands who in the business needs to know. Because now it's not only your DPO needs to know, your compliance people need to know because they're doing the filings with the regulator, if that helps and makes sense to people. This is an ideal for automation. I've had an exercise run in our place because we're now under the CSF. If anyone has a Lux business, that's the regulator in Luxembourg. And obviously somebody in Luxembourg was working on this for a very long time and then DORA arrived. So they launched last April the same framework for incident reporting in Luxembourg. So I already have to have my incident response process has to be DORA compliant from last April. And as we've had incidents around this unauthorized system access, no harm done and whatever, suddenly now we have a very different audience of people collected. So we have the compliance people in the room, we've the DPO in the room, We've business people in the room helping assess the situation. And I have to say, as a CISO, the last exercise we went through, I felt inadequate. I wasn't there controlling anymore. I wasn't the one going through the phases. The incident manager was handling it. The technical people were handling it with our outsourced SOC and SIEM people. It was lovely. I was kind of going, maybe that's how it should be. I'm not as important as I thought I was. The other side of this as well is that that communication piece is now more important. So having a media spokesman briefed, understanding how to brief your exco and your boards. Very important how you do that messaging. As CISOs, we have to be bilingual now. We have to know how to speak technical. We also have to speak business, and we have to speak in terms of risk, financial impacts, and as somebody said that great word this morning, value. What's the value in these things? And a lot of the value statement now is avoiding fines. So what's not to like? Operational resilience testing. This is something that is probably the greatest source of neglect in businesses, if you think about it. So you've got exercises are done, the report is produced, and then you hand it out to everybody. This is slightly changing, because now what the regulator's asking for is you have to identify your critical business functions that carry out your regulated services. So that's not like the most important things either, but any ICT that underpins that function that delivers that service now requires a BIA, BCP plan, and DORA testing. And these are things that might never have been tested. And if you think back to even the simple thing that it's one of the things that got added to my testing plan since the CrowdStrike, how do you rebuild laptops in a hurry? So, there's lots of great learnings here in this stuff. Testing and recovery plans. We now have to identify single points of failure as well. So as you go through your testing, great opportunity to say, that one gateway, that one thing there, that one service. And again, it's a huge opportunity. Like we're looking at stuff where you hosted your own SQL database, or you built your own SQL database on a VM within your cloud environment. You're saying, oh, signing up for Azure SQL is a very good thing to do, because that's multi-region, multi-honed, always available, and in your DR testing and situation, one less thing to build. Similar on the other side with your identity services. If they're not highly resilient and you buy them as a service, same thing. So you can take lots of things out of scope for your testing and make your testing more simple, more straightforward, and get better outcomes, if that makes sense, and sleep better at night. Third-party risk. This is the most horrible piece in it. Most people don't know who to do business with. Shadow IT as well. Who signed the contract? If you're in an organization like mine where we've an unregulated group company and then we've regulated entities underneath for lots of convenient reasons. But now we're an ICT supplier to them. So effectively the regulations comes onto us. So who keeps the register? How much information is needed in that register? There's now new clauses that have to go into contracts. And there's also that piece, and it kills people. I have to ask my suppliers, I need the right to audit you. You're going, you can feck off. And we came from that scene where no one would ever let you audit you. I'd never sign a clause to agree it. But now it's a mandatory legal requirement. If you want to do business with us, and it's in case I don't ever plan on auditing you, but if we have a regulatory issue or otherwise, we need that right. Procurement process and companies are going to change and improve, which is fantastic as well, another good opportunity. That register's due in March. That's my latest knowledge. Don't rely on me for the accuracy of that, but that's the time frame. It's quite a difficult thing to put together because there's a lot of repetition in the data elements within it. So again, I'd suggest go out and look and either build a relational database to hold this and generate the output, and that's going to have to be maintained as well. So again, DORA is kind of like a sea change to some extent. It's not just for Christmas, if that makes sense. Information sharing. I touched on that earlier, mentioning the sharing with law enforcement or having an institutional organization that you work. The banks do this very, very effectively through an organization called the CSA, and they pull together a huge amount of information, and they actually correlate identifiable information on the perpetrators of these toolings, networks, and otherwise, and they help law enforcement with the takedown. They've been very successful. There's some great stories there in that. I think LabHost was taken down roughly a month ago, and again, It's dealt with a lot of smishing campaigns where you were getting, your e-host you hadn't, or e-flow you hadn't paid your toll, or those dreaded custom charges that Unpus seem to want to keep charging me. I wish they could have a consistent URL at this stage because they seem to come from all over the place. So correlation of information, working together, events like this, and then any informal structures you can build or formal structures you can build with other people. The one thing in this is voluntary. You do not have to do this. But I think it's one huge place that we can benefit. Because like sometimes being the CISO in an organization and that's your focus, you can be very isolated in your own organization. So how we work together is really important. And we all face the same common problems. We all have different solutions to them. So it's getting those solutions together. So how's it going? All the people that have DORA in here. We've 82 working days to go. And this is my favorite slide. Based on some feedback that was given on Monday morning, I wasn't at the talk. I only got it secondhand. But somebody from the central bank talked about when it comes into enforcement. And I don't know whether it was a suggestion or whether it was guidance or whatever, but that you should know where you are with your program. If there are gaps between you and the regulation, you should have those documented and you should have a plan about how you're going to close them. There will be a period of time where you've got that opportunity because we're all going through transformations here, but there will be that period of time here. There are certain things like your incident reporting, need those day one. You need your ICT risk register. But then all those things in terms of the process improvement, bringing your controls up to that 4 and 5, you have to have a plan for that. So if you have a plan in place in the early days of this, life should be okay, if that makes sense. And I still love this drawing. I think every project I've ever worked on, be it ISO compliance or otherwise, there's nothing like a deadline. And you find out then what's extremely important or what's the must-haves, if that makes sense. So that's me. Any questions? The only case I've seen in this is there was a dry run of the third-party risk register. But in terms of joining, would say, within like a co-competitor style forum is a great place. How are people going to get caught if law enforcement don't have evidence in IOCs? Those questions. So there's huge benefits to it. If the less people are attacking us, if law enforcement make it uncomfortable for them, if the penalties are severe, that will cause greater enforcement. Similarly on us, when you think of the regulator coming along with very good regulations, very prescriptive regulations, it aids us as well. It's far easier to get budget for a compliance issue than any other issue, if that makes sense. So again, and the one point that I forgot to make in all of this is compliance people, they're black and white. So now you're going from a situation where we have got these security policies where they're followed some of the time. Sometimes we notice violations, that type of thing, and it can be a little informal. Compliance people, you are compliant, you are not compliant. So that's a very different game changer, and that's that mindset that has to change as well. And sometimes, like, I'm only meeting people in last incident we ran, people say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that changes everything. So to make sure that that mindset's communicated, you know.
Thank you so much, Eoin. I appreciate your time today.